And ahead this morning, education overhaul will break down how President Trump dismantling the education department could impact states and also some programs. President Donald Trump is beginning the process of dismantling the Department of Education. And joining us now to discuss this is Parents Defending Education Director of Outreach, Erika Sanzi. Welcome to the National News Desk. We had some action on this, as we all know, yesterday with that executive order. He's directing the president, his Education Secretary Linda McMahon, to take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the department as much as he can without that act of Congress, of course. I guess the first question is, when we talk about this, can the states actually handle whatever is going to be coming their way?
Well, I think it's interesting. First of all, they use the word that they're going to take all legal steps to unwind the department. And really, education was always supposed to live with the states and with local districts. And when the Department of Education was created, the language was very clear in what was passed by Congress that it was not to expand the federal role. Well, clearly that didn't happen. We've seen a big expansion in the federal role. Now, states, about half of the states seem to have, elected officials that support this. The other half of the states don't seem to support this, but they are sending out messages saying that they're ready. The other thing I would say is enforcement will still reside with the department when it comes to things like civil rights, as well as enforcing the recent executive orders around gender ideology and DEI and Title IX. So again, the role, they're not disappearing, and they are planning on utilizing all the authority they still have for enforcement. But yes, definitely trying to shift this responsibility and accountability and money much closer to these localities.
Well, Erica, could you paint a picture for me? Because I've been a reporter for a long time, and I've covered a lot of school board meetings where they talk about curriculums, hiring superintendents, books. That all happens at the local level. So
Correct.
You think about the federal government up here. What is this going to look like? What are some of those duties that could go from the federal level to the local to state level when so many of the duties already reside at the state level?
Yeah, that's a little bit of why I'm not understanding like to the average person, if the department disappeared tomorrow and so money was, it emanated from a different source, I'm pretty sure the vast majority of Americans would not even notice that the department disappeared. Of course, it becomes a big news story and it involves Trump and suddenly people's heads are exploding. But because, again, the federally mandated programs like Title I and the money for students with disabilities, that isn't going to go anywhere, can't go anywhere. So whether that comes out of the Department of Education or comes out of the Department of Treasury or comes out of the Health and Human Services Department, that doesn't really change for the people on the ground. But again, I think a big part of this is when you're talking about a huge department that the bloat has been pretty exponential, that the outcomes have not improved, but on the contrary, have gotten worse, and that it was never really designed to play the role that it's playing. I think the argument is to try to, again, get this back to the states and the local districts where so that it's closer to students and families and teachers.
I want to get to this story before we leave. Now, there's a West Springfield High School, in Fairfax, Virginia, celebrating Women's History Month. And school administrators and teachers, they decorated, a history hallway with the ABCs to me. Apparently, a couple of my producers actually went to this high school, and we were talking about this. Now, tell me if I'm right about this. ABCs, to me, one A was for abortion, and then they had, is that right? And then they had a history, H was for hope, which is great, hope is good, but then they had a picture of Kamala Harris, which makes it a little more political. Is that happening?
So, right, so you figure women's history, you could have found a woman who went with every letter of the alphabet, but instead they take what's a children's book, the ABCs, and they make it abortion with a picture of a coat hanger. Then they did what you did, hope, just a picture of Kamala Harris. J for Justice was the Statue of Liberty surrounded by the Palestinian flag, Ukrainian flag, and transgender flag. P was for Planned Parenthood. And M was for mansplain, which is, again, kind of a
mansplaining? Is that what you just said?
Yep, mansplaining. And then Z was for the male gaze. So they took shots at men, and they also used pretty hyper-political and ideological choices for their letters. So again, it's kind of like, just like we would think it was weird if they did the ABCs and it was all, you know, I don't know, the NRA, or if it was all imagery that we see, you know, if it was T is for Trump. It's kind of like that same thing. It's too bad they couldn't celebrate women's history and not make it hyper political and ideological in a public school
Just real
hallway.
quick, is this still up? Do you know?
That I don't know.
Okay.
That's a good question, actually.
Okay, Erika Sanzi, thank you so much. Parents Defending Education.
Good to see you. Thanks.
Bye.